Welcome to Close Up with the Hollywood Reporter. I'm Carolyn Jardina, and this is our Cinematographer Roundtable. I'd like to introduce our guests, Dariusz Wolski, Erik Messerschmidt, Mandy Walker, Tami Reiker, Joshua James Richards, and Damian Garcia. Welcome, everybody. Opening question for the group. Who are some of the cinematographers that have inspired each of you to pursue your careers and have influenced your work, including your current movies?
Well, two of them are on this roundtable. So Dariusz and Tami have been important people in my life, and a number of DPs. I mean, I was a gaffer for a long time. I worked for so many, so I've been really lucky in my life to have people to look up to, and you know, I'm eternally grateful to all of them for that. The kind of guidance that I got to see. So. Yeah, it's been a really special thing for me, for sure.
For me, we're people from, older generation. I grew up on Italian movies, European films. So it was like Gianni Di Venanzo, and then Sven Nykvist on Swedish side, then great English cameramen like Jeffrey Answorth, John Alcott, that worked with Kubrick, and American ones, of course, Erik, you should know, Greg Toland, then James Wong Ho, all great black and white cameramen, and then 70s generation of Conrad Hall, Gordon Willis. I remember coming to America, and there was all this European cameramen. I said, "How about Gordon Willis and Conrad Hall? They're just American." And we in Europe were just like admiring them. So it's like the great thing about it is it's just such an international profile. It's a visual medium, so you don't have to speak a language very well, but the visual language is international. That's why you have cinematographers from all over the world.
Yeah, for me it was the ones that I grew up with was John Seale and Russell Boyd, and then when I started seeing European films, Robbie Mueller was one of my favorite influences in my life. And then the same as Dariusz, it was Conrad Hall and Gordon Willis. And so a real variety of and again, like Greg Toland and James Wan Howe, they all had different styles and came from different eras. And so you sort of glean little bits and pieces from each of them.
A few of you mentioned Greg Toland. Erik, how did he influence your work on Mank?
Oh God, in so many ways. I mean, I was terrified. Honestly, we looked at the movie, obviously, and the movie provides context for our film, but our film is very different from Citizen Kane in a lot of ways. So it was a kind of more of a springboard, I think, and we certainly borrowed things and discussed it at length. And David and I looked at it, and David was very specific about the things that he wanted to reference. Like, deep focus was something both of us that we were for sure going to do. And a lot of that comes from Citizen Kane, but also just comes from black and white, like our kind of how we responded to black and white anyway. So, but I mean, it's so intimidating to even look at those images and even start to wrap your head around it, because he is so revolutionary and, so important historically in cinematography. So, it's just trying to approaching that was a scary idea.
And you shot monochrome.
We did, yeah. Black and white for black and white. That's right.
So Joshua and Dariusz, you both shot movies in the American West. Would each of you talk about your approach to your specific story? Josh, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, by the time Nomadland rolled around, Chloe and I we'd worked on two other movies out in the heartland. So we felt very familiar with that landscape. It kind of, at this point, I'm probably more familiar with Wall Drug, South Dakota than I am anywhere in England, as weird as that sounds. So for us, we were really excited to make a road movie and to kind of place that in these places that we'd fallen in love with. And the West was something I grew up kind of with the mythology of. Like, my dad raised me on a lot of Anthony Mann and John Ford. I read Bury My Heart, A Wounded Knee. So I always had this fascination with the heartlands and the American West. And the cinema that came out of that. So for me, these were like dream projects, really.
Darius, what inspired your work on News of the World?
It's the kind of same. We all grew up on Westerns, loved Westerns. Every young boy wants to be on a horse, and
What are your favorites, Darius?
Old ones. Actually, my favorite one ever is Little Big Man, which is a little bit later. It's a 70s version of West, which is mythologizing the whole history.
Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah. That was absolutely brilliant film. But, all the classic Westerns were great. Yeah, but, our approach was just take all this in and just make a contemporary movie, Just don't try to stylize it too much. Don't try. It was a bit of interesting because I've never worked with Paul, and Paul comes from Paul Greengrass comes from very kind of documentary background, being a combat reporter. So the camera is not shaking because it used to shake because bombs were coming. And he told me quite a few stories. So that's where the style comes from. Is basically from trying to grab something that. And he made a big style out of it, and Born Out Ultimatums and other movies, and Coming Together was our first film, and I wanted to respect his way he works, but at the same time I wanted to give him something else. So I think we've tuned him down a little bit, and even though the movie is handheld, but it doesn't look like it's handheld, So just a little bit of it's more of it's like yours. I haven't seen your film, but I hear great things about it. But it's a road movie, So,
well, I like how you say you're taking all those sort of traditional Hollywood. Well, because when you go out into the heartlands, there is you're entering into such a sort of cinematic conversation just because of how much cinema there is coming out of it. So. It's when you're shooting in these places, it's hard. You almost can't ignore it. You can't sort of ignore these giants of cinema. So it was fun on Nomadland as well to the sort of irresistible references and kind of a dialogue with those older films. But I like what you say. It's sort of give a modern film that still acknowledges cinematic traditions.
Now, Tami, you worked with Gina Prince Bythewood on The Old Guard and Regina King on One Night in Miami. Would you talk about working with each of those directors?
Sure. So Regina King, this is our first film together, and this was her first feature film, but she was really experienced from doing a lot of TV work, and she was just incredible to work with. She definitely had a very clear vision of the film that she wanted to make. And these four iconic Black men, these characters, we based a lot of our references on historical accuracy. That was very important to her. So we used a lot of references from Neil Leffler and Howard Bingham and Eve Arnold. Those Cassius Clay and Malcolm X were so photographed. We had a lot of material to work with. And we actually recreated a lot of photographs that were the shot of Cassius Clay in the swimming pool, or the overhead shot of the fight of the Clay Liston fight. That was from The Greatest of All Time, the GOAT book. So it was really an amazing experience. And then Gina Prince Bythewood, we're working together right now. Again, that was our 5th collaboration for The Old Guard. And for both of us, it was the largest film that we had done and the most action.
What were some of the new challenges that you faced with the scope of Old Guard?
The amount of visual effects, definitely, that was for both of us. And the fighting. It's a lot of blood. Old Guard. So, but, it seems like a big step, but once we had an incredible team around us, and it's just breaking it all down, and keeping Gina's very, the authenticity of each character, and they're all very character driven, even though there's a lot of fighting and bloodshed. So keeping that always in mind.
Mandy, tell us about working with Nikki and on Mulan.
Nikki's amazing, first of all, and I had never worked with her before, but I think she's a great storyteller, and for both of us, it was the first time we were doing a big action film as well, and so we did a lot of research into looking at Chinese cinema and art and photography and, films, martial arts films that had fight sequences like the films of Zhang Yimou and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and The Last Emperor, of course. But really in the back of our minds was always that, this was a woman's story and we were following her journey. So the way we looked at the battle sequences and the fight sequences was always about centering the audience's experience with hers. So even when we were doing a lot of our stunt sequences and our battle sequences, and we would go and watch, we always talked about how we would put it into the perspective of Mulan. And so how we would move the camera with her and how we would make it. We actually decided that, instead of having like a melee of fighting or generic violence, it would be quite elegant and focused. And so that's how we watched and looked every time we rehearsed. And Nikki would change a lot of the action to work with the camera. So, we would move the camera with her body movements and we would focus on her face on super long lenses. And because Yi Fei did a lot of her own stunts, we could not try and avoid her face, when she was doing some of her martial arts moves, and trying as much as we could to shoot in camera. So we had visual effects, of course, but we started from having things real. We would build sets, exterior sets, and have them extended, and a lot of our fight sequences were in camera or was enhanced later on, with adding people in the background or whatever. So that, to me, it was a fantastic experience, something I'd never done before. And, just working with the choreography of it was pretty amazing.
And Damian, tell us about shooting in Monterey and New York.
Well, it was fun. It was a strange project because it was like, we spend a lot of time like doing it, to think about it. Fernando gave me the only reference that he gave me at the beginning was like a long playlist of songs. And we started to kind of build this film, like trying to be like in between a documentary and a fiction film, like trying to be respectful with the environment, but despite that, like trying to create like our own point of view and try to be subjective with the character. It was fun. It was rough, and Monterrey is I don't know if you guys know Monterrey, for sure no, but it is a really strange place, and it is really rough and particular, and it's also full of beauty, and it was really nice to portray my country with with a different look that we used to. I don't know. Mexico is always portrayed in a very violent and raw way, and we try to, despite we're doing a kind of violent film, see it from a different perspective.
What were some of the influences that you and the director turned to when you were planning the look?
Well, it was mainly like still photographers. Actually, I mean, the vast majority of the approaches that we had was like Alex Webb and Lee Friedlander, and Paul Fusco, people like that, like because we were very interested in that of the still photography, like that not being disruptive and no like kind of breaking things. They generate like a nice visual image, and they portray a point of view with the things that they are there, and that was kind of our approach.
I mean, that was always my way of working, just looking at stills of the great photographers and taking it further and trying to basically recreate it for the whole scene. And people, some people sometimes say my work is very stylized, but I always say that it's not. That actually comes from reality. And when you look at great still photographers, you look at one shot and it's just, my goodness, it's so brilliant. But it was the guy walked into the room, saw a perfect light through the window and took a shot. So it was actually a documentary photograph. But it's, on another hand, it's just a beautiful image that you can say stylized. So what we do, we take everything, what I do, I take everything from reality as much as possible. So it wasn't much of a difference between what I do with Ridley and what I do with Paul. You just take reality and you try to capture it in the most. You just find the beauty in everything. You can go to. Wild West is very photogenic, but you can go to slums of Mexico City or India, and you can find the beauty there too. You can find the beauty in New York and textures, and it's all about textures. It's all about what inspires you, and always draw from reality. Always, when you see strange light coming through, sometimes New York was the most inspiring place for me. It just taught me so much about light and stuff. Anyway, you can be in a room and there's light coming through one window. In Hollywood, when you have a stage, you have 3 windows. You end up with lights through 3 windows, right? It's pretty normal. But in New York, there's a building out there, so light comes through 1 window, and nobody would have thought about it if you haven't seen it for real. And that goes on and on and on. That's my inspiration with all the work I do.
Well, I just thought it was interesting because for me, Dariusz, New York, because I went to New York Film School, and for me, it was only when I got out of New York that I started kind of getting inspired by America. Yeah. I guess I was just, I'm a country boy, so I grew up with that. It's about the figure and the relationship between the landscape for me and Chloe. And so, and definitely learning from the light in South Dakota, that definitely changed. It's given me a career, quite frankly.
No, I can't wait to see your film. Man.
Oh, thanks. Dariusz, you shoot a lot of magic hour though, right? Does that ever, was that ever a challenge or a problem working with?
It's nerve-wracking. Depends how many pages of dialogue you have to do.
You had quite a few scenes in News of the World though, didn't you? You had quite a few dialogue scenes.
They were pretty simple scenes, yeah. They were pretty simple, yeah. It's just getting everything together, yeah.
And you always leave something in the sky in those fire scenes.
Yeah, that was tricky. Yeah, it was. Sometimes we messed up. Sometimes we didn't have enough time. But yeah, most of the time we were lucky. Yeah. If it all depends on the director and actors. If you have to commit, and everyone has to be aware of it that you're doing it. Yeah. With Ridley, it's easy because Ridley uses multiple cameras and he just understands. So we can do a 4-page scene, a perfect sunset, but that's only, you have to have a great director behind you to do that.
It's funny when you talk about the embracing or finding inspiration. I have grown to just completely adore working in the studio. I love it. I love the control and the blank slate of it, and having a set that's been discussed and pre-visualized and worked out in advance, and it is like a security blanket for me, the studio, and so it's I definitely am being victim to nature is the cinematographer's Achilles heel, I think, a bit sometimes. Yeah. You guys did it brilliantly, but.
Well, but what I think, because I've done my share of stage work, is actually I had a great example on the movie that I just finished, because we shot, it's like a 14th century story that happened in France. So we shot for first half of the film in France in real castles. So if you want to put a window out lights outside the window, you look out and there's 100 feet drop and a moat. Okay, so that's how but you kind of embrace it, and so we did basically 30 days in France with real locations, and then we went to stage after COVID shut down, blah blah blah. We went to finish it on stages, and And the greatest thing about shooting on real location, you come on the stage and you want to treat it exactly like you don't have all this equipment. Right. You just restrain yourself, completely. Yeah. Okay, there is a mode that I can't put like. So,
exactly.
And this is a great approach, just taking reality and then introducing it. I remember I did this film a long time ago called Dark City. It was all staged, but I just came working with Tony Scott, and it was early days of sodium vapor lights, and we just loved those lights. So I said, let's just put all the lights on the stage, make them sodium vapor, So all of a sudden you have a stage scenario, but everything is kind of not like stage, it's real, And that was always my approach, how to make stage look like real. But I love working on stage. God, you don't have to worry about sunset or sunrise. It's great. Don't take me wrong, I love it too.
But there is something interesting that happens though, Erik. With the elements, sometimes having a common enemy, I found that it can unite a crew. It's like,
for sure.
Sorry guys, that sun ain't waiting for anyone. And we always found, we'd call it the magic hour hustle, where it's like, okay guys, all that stuff we're talking about, we've now got 20 minutes to get all of it. So and by that point, hopefully everyone knows when they need to be. But I hear you, if you don't get that luck with the weather gods, then it certainly is the Achilles heel for sure. Yeah, you ride your luck. I'm sure you guys all know what I'm talking about.
Erik, do you want to elaborate on working with David Fincher?
David's amazing. He's an incredible collaborator. He's the best. I adore every day working with him. We've been working together now for a few years, and we have a pretty good shorthand actually, and quite a bit of back and forth and discussion. And we don't actually talk much about how the movie looks. We talk much more about sequencing and editing and like how we're going to tell the story, how we're going to take the scene apart, or what we're going to play as one and when we're going to cut. And so I love that. I really love that part of the process with him. And, we tend to get quite detailed. So, and we, generally have some time to work. So it's, it's something that he really cares about. So, for a cinematographer, it's a really fantastic environment to work in, because we can get very fractal about certain things or specific about certain things and art direct the frame together. And so, he's an amazing person to work with. But it's like every director has their working style and their practice. And I think it's, for cinematographers, a huge part of our work is learning what the director's process is and trying to figure out how you can fit in their machine to best support them, So it's like whoever you're working with, you sort of see what they need and how you can help and what you can contribute and what you can take away from the experience. And I like that. That's my favorite part of the job by far, is that kind of process of discovery with the director and figuring out where you fit in the mechanism.
Yeah, that's my favorite part too, is that in prep, you just become, you're connected at the hip. And let me tell you, it was really fun to be connected at the hip with Regina King in New Orleans. She's, you're just like, you're trying to absorb as much as you can to understand their process and the characters. And, you're with them through every art meeting, hair, makeup, because you're trying to get they're very busy and you're trying to get as much prep time with them. You're also sitting through castings and, as a cinematographer, it's fascinating. You get to be involved in every single part of it, which that's what I love. And each part of that also is helping inform you of how it's going to look and how the story and, sitting through rehearsals. And that would be something that is misunderstood maybe about cinematography, how much you're a part of the prep, from every aspect.
Yeah, I kind of think cinematographers are overcredited for how movies look and undercredited for how the stories are told in a way. Like, I kind of think that we end up taking on a lot of credit for things that really belong to the production designer or the costume designer, to be honest. And yet then when the movie gets assembled and all those pieces we've been so intimately involved in in figuring out how to cover scenes, or, you know, how to approach certain moments. And I think that's a part of our job that is really not understood.
I agree, Erik. That's very smart what you just said. Yeah, never thought of it, but it's true. Yeah.
Yeah, so I constant, you know, that question you always get asked by people that want to get into this industry, like, what advice do you have as, you know, for young cinematographers? I always just to agree with Erik, you know, it's sometimes I say, like, get good at reading scripts, because actually as a cinematographer, that's kind of what you need to be good at seeing potential for stories. And then when we get together with the director, it's really about how to tell that story. And perhaps that's what people don't, it's not really purely aesthetics. It's about finding, again, that word language. It's like the language of cinematography. It's like, how are you telling your story? Yeah.
But that's kind of interesting how you create your own grammar with the director, and you figure out where your goalposts are and what your style is, and you work within that, you know, and then you explore and push things, of course. But that process of, like, figuring out what you're not going to do or what you are going to do is so integral with what we do, you know, from as a craft, I guess.
And Chloe and I always end up boiling that down to, like, a certain list of rules. Once we get to that point, we're like, what is the grammar? Then it's like, well, no, remember, we decided we're going to shoot those close-ups like this, and we're going to shoot all the wides on this lens. And I don't know about you guys, but that's always the way we've built that grammar. And it's almost like, these are our colors, these are the paints that we're painting in, and that's it. Do you guys, it's almost like a means of, you know, it's almost like essentialism. It's sort of getting it down to what the bare essentials of the language is.
I really like what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, like, on Need of the World, we had the rule, no cranes, you know. I figured, let's shoot a Western without a crane. And we did it. So it's fine. You know?
Yeah.
I love restraining myself, you know, because I've done a few movies before, and when you're overwhelmed with equipment and possibilities, it just gets silly. So it's nice to restrain yourself and say, okay, I'm going to just do this with no cranes. Let's just do it. Try to stay handheld as much as possible, but not crazy, or steady cam. But in the same time, no matter how well you plan the film, that's going back to Ridley, you know, you can figure things out, but it's nice to challenge yourself, because you've done certain things certain way for so many times. So you tend to fall into, like, I call it your tricks that you've done. You know, if you're in trouble, so you can just get away with doing this and this and that, because you've done this so many times.
What are your tricks, Darius?
No, I mean, what it is. No, I mean, just
let me just get my pen out.
How you stage the scene, you know, how you cover the scene, all this stuff. You know, it becomes a certain routine, but in the same time, you always want to challenge yourself. And Ridley is great, because he's done so many movies in his life, and he will still challenge himself. You know, like when I started working with him, it's like there was just this place to put a shaft of light, and I had it, and I said, really, do we really need this shot of light? No, forget about it. Just turn it off. Totally happy, because I didn't want to do any of it, but I was just testing him how far he wants to go, you know, with stuff that he's done. You know, he always gives it to other directors with this, you know, this stuff like Alan Parker did. You know, this was basically what he did. He tries to use other names, but constantly challenge yourself. Like, you know, Scots were famous from long lenses at some point, and they invented the whole thing. That was what. And then when I working with him was just like, oh, no, just go in, go wider. You know, it's just like, there's no rules. There's no rules. Constantly challenging and constantly looking for something new. I mean, that's what I find fascinating.
Okay, we're going to go to the next subject. Compared to some of the other areas of filmmaking, cinematography hasn't been as quick to diversify, and we haven't seen a lot of diversity in this unusual season. Why do you think that is the case, and do you see any signs of change?
I get asked this question all the time. I think because when I first started, there was hardly any women doing my job at all in the world, that was a while ago. And it's getting better, and there's more now, and there's more diverse crews, and there's more women and people of colour coming into the industry. And I think because people are consciously aware now that it's been the other way for a really long time. And I think in terms of my job, when I wanted to be a cinematographer and somebody said it to me, girls don't do that job. And I couldn't understand why. And I just went, I'm going to ignore that, and just went and did it, And I think that definitely is changing. It's a little slower in our world, but it's definitely changing. I mean, Tami, I'm sure you've been in the same situation as me. You started a similar time.
Yeah, I definitely feel like as far as the camera department, it's changing in diversity and the amount of women in the camera department. There's a wave coming, and that is really exciting. And there is a big push now, which is great. On one night in Miami, we hit 70% diversity in the crew in New Orleans, and that was really important to Regina, and it was important to me, and we made that happen.
Just from my point of view, when I arrived at NYU Film School, I think the film schools have also shifted, and in a really positive way. All the classes were at least 50-50 and completely eclectic. So I do think that's positive.
I think that is absolutely, and also think that you talk about like kind of diversity in different ways. And I think that one of the good things about cinematography, it is like, doesn't matter where you're from or who you are or anything. It's like a very nice international language, and it's something like that. I don't know. I'm most answering the question more like as a matter of where you are. Meanwhile, you're working in a project, right? And there's something that I really like, and I was thinking that the other day that I'm shooting here in London. Like, the cinematography has like a common language that you're there and you know what is happening. Doesn't matter if you're shooting in Tanzania or in Mexico or in Brazil or in New York, And I think that makes the crews more diverse. Not only women and men, but people from everywhere can work in everyone's production.
In the productions where you are seeing change, is that coming from the director or the producers? Where are you seeing the effort being made?
By the director. Definitely. I mean, with Gina and Regina, it was definitely really important for both of them. And so that, they gave the push. And
I think Joshua's point about the film school is a good one. I think that it's, we as an industry, we have to do better about providing opportunities to people and encouraging people to do things. I mean, it has, I don't know about everybody else, but I came from film school, and when I was in film school, it was not particularly diverse, and it is changing now, and I think that making sure that those opportunities are available to people of diverse backgrounds will help encourage our industry to become more diverse as well, so I think it has to be holistic. It has to be from the hiring standpoint and from the education standpoint and the training standpoint. We have to think about it holistically. It's you can't just force it from one direction. This is something that has to grow from within, and we can do a big part as cinematographers by encouraging and celebrating people that showing people from diverse backgrounds that there are opportunities for them, and I think that we have that responsibility, from the youngest people in our industry, to let them know that there is a future in this for them if they want it, and I think that's really important.
I think it's got to come down to the individual choices as well, because when I arrived at film school, I mean, I gravitated towards people who were not, I didn't want to shoot for the white guys. I didn't, that wasn't interesting. It's like, I'm not going to learn anything from that. I wanted to shoot with Toma Bodomo from Ghana or Chloe Zhao from Beijing, you know, and that was my choice to do that. I didn't want to. So, you know, I do think artists also have to make the right choices. And like Fran said, I'm sure Tami, Mandy agree, you know, she was just like, just give us money. Let's just stop talking about it, give us money. And I mean, I've witnessed Chloe Zhao's career, and I'm telling you, just give Chloe money. She'll figure it out. So it's like the talent's out there. I think we just have to just make it a fair pot, you know?
No, I agree with all of you guys. It's a huge cultural change for better. And it's, of course, it's slow. It's never fast enough, but it's happening. It's happening. And another thing is like African Americans, women, diversity, more heroes they have. They like Tami, for example, you becoming a hero for other women to become cinematographers. If there's, you know, like great African American directors, women directors, the more accomplished they get, more successful they get, they're going to become a role model. So, you know, some underprivileged person from somewhere else can say, oh, if she's done it, I can do it. You know, me coming from Poland, there were some Polish cinematographers ahead of me. It's okay, if he can do it, maybe I can do it. It's all about role modeling, and it's slowly happening. That's the most, I think role model is the most important thing, you know.
Absolutely.
Great African-American cinematographers now. You have a great, I mean, I used to admire women directors way back, like Agnieszka Varda, and, you know, from Agnieszka Holland, the Polish director, that, you know, these are like 70, older generation women who were real pioneers in the whole thing. Tough, didn't take any BS from anybody. So it's happening. It's happening. It's a very positive thing.
Now, Erik, what's your experience been like working amid COVID, and are there any new tools you've been using?
Yeah, I mean, I work, for example, I work with headsets with the crew. So I have my comm system, and I talk to the gaffer and the key grip and the operator and the dolly grip, and we have our own little system for communication, and that really helps, I've found, and especially with PPE and you know, I guess we're using remote heads more than we have before. I guess in general, but yeah, I mean, I think, and to be honest, my experience shooting has not been that much different than previous experiences. Just a little bit more social distance and a little bit more planning, which I think is a good thing, and a little bit, and everything's just a tad bit slower. So, you know.
Yeah, I would say the actual shooting feels the same. The prep feels different, but yeah, when you're on set, you're still making a movie and everything. And as a cinematographer, we do have these A, B, C zones, but we've always been in A zone, so it kind of, don't you feel like it feels the same for us as far as? Do you feel that, Mandy?
Yeah, I do. I do feel that, and I think, you know, like you were saying, that we're used to troubleshooting. So you're in a situation all the time where you have to think on your feet and make something work that, you know, like for instance, you know, Joshua and Dariusz talking about day exteriors. There's a moment where you have to go, okay, I can't do this. How am I going to tell the story in this moment? I've got 20 minutes. And it's sort of the same for us. Like we're always adapting. And as long as you feel that you are on the same page and you're in that, you know, you have the visual language of the movie in your head, there's another way of executing something. You know, there's always a different way of telling the same story, whether you use different lenses or, you know, like Erik was saying, you're in an LED volume or whatever, or that you're on a remote head, but you work out a way of still having the same visual language, but executing it differently.
I remember back in the days when Fuji still had their office in New York, there was this guy working at Fuji, and I just started film school, and he was like, hey, I've got a word of advice for you. Filmmaking is 10% creative, and then it's 90% moving things from A to B. And I was like, what? Now I'm like, totally, man. Because it's like what Mandy's saying on set, really, it's just problem solving. Like you've come up with the language and all the, you know, you've done the creative and all your clever ideas and everything, and then you have to figure out how to do it. And it's really just problem solving. It's just figuring out how do we get from A to B every day. So if you enjoy that, then yeah.
I always feel like I do my best work when I'm a pessimist. Like it's never going to work. I'm going to get in trouble with that. The sun's going to go there. What am I going to, like if I'm confident about it, then I'm never successful.
Yeah. Ever. Big trouble.
Yeah.
Suffering is the best place to be, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That's what I always with Gina, and she's always like, don't say that. I'm like, okay, but worst case scenario.
Right. Yeah.
She's like, don't say it. I was like, well, it is not going to happen, but we'll have it in the back of our head. Okay.
Yeah.
Worst case,
And that's why you're always, and you're always like a student as a cinematographer, because every project is, well, maybe not for you guys, but for me, there's a big gap between projects. So I arrive and I'm like, wait, hang on a sec. There's this moment on day one where, it's just total panic attack. I'm like, I've got nothing. I feel truly at square one. And so, but then it's this exciting learning process again, because every project is truly that different, that, it is a new adventure. So it's pretty much a dream job in that way.
We have a line on the set. We always say, okay, what can possibly go wrong? No, the first thing in the morning.
Well, Chloe and I always expect there'll be something really earth-shaking that will go wrong. At some point, there'll be something. So on Nomadland, I remember that happened quite early on. And so we're like, good, the terrible, the earth-shaking thing already happened. So, you always have to plan for that, I feel.
As of this recording, Warner Media announced plans to send 2021 movies directly to streaming. What are all of your thoughts on the future of the theatrical experience?
I'm hoping people are desperate to get back to the cinema. I mean, a lot of people that I talk to, they miss it, they miss the social aspect of it, of going out and being in an environment with an audience, and you can watch stuff at home on your TVs all the time. But I think that most people I talk to, not just people in the film industry, are missing that part of their lives.
I agree. I feel like once, we get out of COVID, I mean, hopefully the theaters will still be there, but that people are really desperate to go back out and have that social interaction, and whether, going with your kids to the movies or, just that event of it, I think will always be something that people crave.
I can't wait to get back, but I think I think in a way it's great that the movies are available to people. Like you want as many people to see your movies as possible, so I think that's fantastic. I do think though that the captive audience aspect of the cinema is special, and not taking the ability for the audience to pause the movie at any time is actually a good thing for storytellers, because we grab them and we put them in the seat and they have to watch the movie, or they leave, hopefully they don't leave, but they watch the movie and you sort of have their undivided attention. And I think that's a really special thing that you don't really have in the television world. So I hope it sticks around. I can't wait to get back to this theater.
Well, I agree, but in the same time, because of the COVID, you have to understand. I will be in defense of Warner Brothers, because the only two movies I've seen was Erik's film and Mandy's film, just because it's streaming.
Right.
So here we go. And I really enjoyed it on the big screen, on pretty decent television, provided
I agree.
properly, adjusted and stuff. That's a separate problem. But hey, we can sit at home and see those films. And
but I will say, with Nomadland, we had for our premiere, Telluride were kind enough to do a drive-in premiere for our movie Nomadland, and I have to say that seeing people congregate together wearing masks in the middle of a plague, whilst it was literally like raining ash from the sky, to come together and watch a movie from their vehicles. It was one of those moments for me personally where I was just I'm a filmmaker for life now, because
fantastic.
It made me realize I'm kind of ready to go down with the ship, to be honest. Like if filmmaking stops being about that, of people coming together, congregating for an experience that's awe-inspiring, I don't know, I might prefer to do something else.
Yeah. I think it'll be a bit of both, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But that's just that. To me, I came to America to be a filmmaker. Do you know what I mean? That's what excited me about, and that's what Seal does. I'm excited about all the storytelling platforms, but I just worried sometimes that we take things for granted, things that are actually quite fragile and that probably need protecting right now. So
I think the exhibitors have to do a better job. I mean, I think that they have to. The cinema going experience, at least in the United States, is not that great, really, and it could really improve. I think in a way, streaming services have put a little pressure on the cinema. Obviously, COVID is a huge pressure, but when we're back, I think that exhibitors they have to up their game a little bit, because the modern streaming experience with a really high end television is a really good one.
With so many, consumers, but also award season voters watching your films on a variety of TVs and devices, are you concerned about communicating your true creative intent and your artistry? We were talking about this the other day, that it really, it all depends on what TV and their settings, and your film can look completely different with the wrong settings. Yes,
I think that is so overwhelmingly dangerous that I try not to be worried about that, because it's like every TV is a world, and it could be really, really awful. I mean, it's not like a bad projection in the cinema. It's like really can look like really bad. But so I don't know. I think that we have to live with that.
Only worry about the things you can control, right?
Exactly. And the TV of your mother, your father, and your brother, and your sister.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have to wrap up, but I want to say thank you to all of you for participating. And this year, due to circumstances, we are doing our roundtable remotely. So thank you all for trying out our new process for this as well. And stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.